Hello viewers, today for cleaning and servicing we have an Ambassador branded, which I believe was a store, an Ambassador branded Lasko Galaxy 12-inch Oscillations table desk fan. The informations have disappeared, which is kind of odd. Usually they are like raised on the plastic, but they're just gone. There's a number there. It looks like it says 235 104 or 704. Who knows? This is definitely having some issues here, because it shouldn't be like that. It looks, from a quick preliminary investigation, that the oscillation arm is just not screwed on to the base. So that should be a simple fix, providing I can find a screw that is the right size. That may be a little bit more complicated because it's a weird screw, because it has a smooth part. I think this screw is too thin, but it would be something kind of like this screw, where the top doesn't have any threads, and that's where the mechanism would move along. You know, because if it has the threads, it'll just cut the wear the plastic off over time, so you can't do that. Anyways, I'll set that screw aside, and maybe I can get that screw to work. Anyways, on other fronts, it's very, very dusty. You can see that we have a tremendous amount of dust accumulation on the blades and the guard, particularly right here. It's pretty much blocked solid, and over the years that will just start to come out further and further and block more and more airflow. I have concerns that this unit may never be the greatest cosmetically, because it has some, like, kind of seems like the consistency of hairspray on the badge, and presumably everywhere else as well. It does kind of scratch off, so it can be removed, but it's going to take some time. Unless like a cleaner will take it off easier, I'm not sure that that's going to look any better afterwards, but we can definitely get it running good mechanically, and it'll be a nice fan to use. May not be a great display piece, but you know, who knows, we'll see. The plastic here is still pretty shiny. It's got that stuff on the badge. It's probably on the blades too, which is gonna stink. Alright, let's give it a test run here so we can see how it operates before the servicing. Looking at 121.8 volts. We'll do a watts or in amps. I think these are supposed to draw around 0.35 amps full power. Seems to be a bit slow. Yeah, the bearings are a little bit stiff on this one. I don't think they're anywhere near locking up, but they are a little bit stiff, which is kind of unusual for these. They typically have very good bearings. But this is obviously a very high hours unit. This definitely put in its time. Blade is a bit out of whack, but not majorly. It looks worse than I think it is. Okay, it's not moving a whole lot of air. Kind of sounds restricted. That power draw in there was 0.23 amps. I don't think it'll make any difference, but people have asked, it's been an item of curiosity, does the fan draw less power when it's clean or dirty? I don't think it makes any difference. Performance-wise, it makes a huge difference in airflow, though. That's 0.28 amps, and it's actually throwing out a pretty good breeze, despite all that dust on there. I think it's the bigger issue is on those newer fans with the plastic guards. Those really block up quick. Okay, that's 0.28 amps, and then high. High is 0.35 on the nose. And it's actually moving a tremendous amount of air. Very powerful. It'll get even more powerful once it's cleaned up. And listen to the sound of it. I'm going to play this clip again at the end once it's running properly and clean. Has a very restricted sound to it. Does not at all sound like these typically do. And the balance is okay. It's not perfect, but it's not bad enough to really be of any kind of concern. Okay. Now the bearings are definitely a little bit dry. They need some oil, but considering I'm sure this has never been oiled before and it has plenty of hours on it, it is holding up quite nicely. Okay. So let's get into this. I did put a tie wrap on this side of the guard because most of the clips are missing. I think there's only one clip remaining. Yep, looks like it. I believe those clips are still under production. I've never tried to purchase any before, but I know some of the Air King fans, that 9-inch one does still come with those, so they must be making them somewhere. I've never really liked these clips. I much prefer the metal ones that stay on the guard. They don't have a tendency to break and they're much easier to use. Okay, so we're inside the unit now, and you can see the dust was just solid on there in the middle, which of course will block a lot of air. Alright, so we'll take this off now. Let's see, is it, no, it doesn't look too bad as far as that annoying whatever that is on the base goes. Though I really don't understand why it would be on the base but not the blade as well. People rarely ever clean inside of here, and so this is often a good way you can see how many hours it has, or if it's been cleaned before. There's definitely a lot more dust inside there than on the outside, so it's possible that this has even been cleaned before. And it just was a very heavily used fan through the course of its life. That was a bit loose. Alright, so we got 2 screws on here now. And now we can see the defect here pretty clearly. I think all that's wrong with it is the oscillator arm, which is this right here, is just simply not screwed on. I don't know if that was just never assembled correctly or if it became undone over the years. I don't know what happened, but that should be a pretty simple fix as long as I can find the right screw. Now the only really frustrating part that we're going to go through here is within getting this cover off. Supposedly, and I've been told this by several reliable sources, supposedly these knobs are intended to just pull off I have never had good results doing that. It seems to me like it would require an unreasonable amount of force to do so. I mean, I'm putting a fair bit of force on it right now. It's not even budging. So it makes me kind of nervous to just keep prying away at it. This doesn't really pass through here. I've done it before. After like 25 minutes of shouting, I've been able to get these to fit through here, but it's not ideal. But to me, it just doesn't. I mean, I can't bring myself to put any more force on it than I just did. Something's gonna break. So I am going to try to finagle this through the. Sometimes what I do is I take a file once this is off, and I just enlarge that hole a little bit so that it comes off easier. Because to have to go through this every time you want to service the fan is kind of ludicrous. I'm sure there's someone shouting at the video, just pull it off. Well, I'm not doing it. I don't think that's really a good idea. I know it's supposed to come off, but I must be doing something wrong because I've never been able to get it to come off. At least not once I get something in there to aid. I don't know, it just doesn't. Oh gosh. Okay, well, it's off now and it didn't break, so. Okay, I guess you just force it off as hard as you can and eventually it goes. Whatever, I don't get that. Okay, so now we're into the fan. That, if you can get past that, the rest should be a breeze. So what I want to do now, just to make sure that my theory is correct, that everything is fine, I'm going to see, hey, you know what? It may work. It may work. It's a little bit loose, but it may work enough to suffice. As long as it doesn't lift off, which I don't think that it really would have a tendency to do so, we're going to have to do something else to make it. I think that'll be noisy, so we'll have to do something to make it, make the screw wider. Put some tape or something under so it's more secure. But let's just check and see if the oscillation works. Now that that's on there. And if it does work, then it'll just be a matter of finding the correct screw. Yeah, it works just fine. The only problem is that it's going to be a little bit noisy because there's too much play there. You can hear it click as it goes back and forth. Alright, so that's good news. That means we just need to find a screw that's the right size. So I will at some point go to the store and I will try to find the correct screw, but for now we'll just leave it like that, and then if I ever get the screw, I will change it out. So now we're inside the unit. In order to lubricate the bearings, we're going to pull the shaft out because these unfortunately did not have all ports. So what we're going to do is, the first thing we got to do is we got to tap out this grab for the blade. So I'm going to set the fan down like this, and I'm going to get a junky screwdriver or whatever you want to rest the shaft on, and I'm just going to gently tap this out. Maybe we'll go the other side. Yeah, so these are not symmetrical. One side is ever so slightly larger than the other. So you need to push it out with the thicker side coming out, as I did the second time. Not a big difference, but you can see very carefully that one side, it's the right side on this picture. The right side is slightly thicker. Alright, so once that's out, I can put the fan back upright. And we're going to clean the shaft off. This has a bunch of hair on it, so we'll take that off. And there's a little rubber thing on there. We're going to push that back all the way. And we're going to power the fan on. You have to do this kind of quickly because the motor will get hot without any air flow around it. We're going to power it on and clean the shaft with some sanding paper, just to get this junk off of there and any rust or anything that's on there. Well, we don't want oscillations. Okay, I'm going to follow up with a finer grit sandpaper. And now we have a nice clean shaft to work with, and this is very important because when we slide the bearing off the shaft, if we're not sliding it over a clean, smooth surface, you're going to ruin the bearings. So now that the bearing is clean, it's ready to be taken apart. So we're going to start in the back. There's 4 screws around the motor outside. Sometimes they're kind of tight, so you want to make sure that you have a good properly fitting bit to break them free. This one's about to strip. Usually these are okay, but every now and again I come across one that's a little bit too tight. So let's make sure we really get a good properly fitting bit on there. This is pretty good. It's super important to use a bit that fits the screw exactly in a case like this, otherwise it will strip. And it can still, but this will minimize the stripping for sure. See how much easier that was with the right size bit? Came right off. So I'll just break them all free by hand. And I'll use the screwdriver. Oh, there's only 3 of them. I'll use the screwdriver to take them the rest of the way off. Okay, so now the motor is ready to be split apart, and we are entering another step that requires caution because the wire connection here is pretty fragile and it will break if you're not careful, so be careful. It will not break if you're careful. So the motor separates like this. If this was screwed down, I would unscrew this first. And then the challenge now becomes you have to use the extra slack here to allow this to come back. And then the capacitor, make sure this part does not scrape the windings. I'm going to take the capacitor out. Just got like a little funny clip to it. And oh, this is locked on here. Okay, hold on. We don't really need to undo these, but I would rather, just makes it easier. Let's undo. So actually we don't have to take this off. That was not necessary. Instead, let's undo these. Now sometimes these come off real easy. You can just crimp them on the opposite side they were originally crimped and they'll come undone. Sometimes. This time it's not looking like that's going to be the case here. These are pretty strong. Yeah, those not budging. Okay, that's fine. What we could do alternatively to get a little bit more slack is we can remove these 2 screws on the top. And then we'll take this off. Now, here is another area of caution. There are 2 little balls, like what you'd find in a bearing, inside of here. And if this piece goes down, those 2 will come out and fly across the room, and it is infuriating. So, because we're going to be manipulating this, and I really don't want that to happen, I'm going to take I just got to put something on there so that it doesn't slide down. I'll take a piece of, I'll just take a piece of wire, for instance, and I'm going to wrap this around here, and I'll make it really tight so that the thing can't move down. Okay, so now we can take this all off and not worry about this piece pushing down and causing a freak show. Now we're ready to slide this off. And this has enough slack now that we can kind of take it away from the windings, and it can hang. It'll be okay to hang here, but you got to set it down very, very carefully. So now we'll slip the shaft out. This is another area of caution. If it gets stuck, it's coming very easily. If at any point it gets stuck there, you need to stop, put everything back together, and sand it down some more. Okay, so now we're looking inside the motor here. It's a little bit dusty, so we're going to get some compressed air and blow the dust out. It's very important to get all the dust out of the windings, because pretty much the only thing that will eventually break these fans is something overheats in here, and that's going to be a result of too much dust building up and blocking airflow. So keep the motor clean, and it should run for quite a few decades. Okay, so now with that cleaned, we're going to reposition so that we can take a look at the bearings. I'll reposition this horizontally, again taking care of this to not get excessive force on that connection or scrape up against the windings. Alright, so I gotta go get a ticker towel. We're going to start with cleaning. So we have a thrust washer in here. I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to put it back on the shaft the same way that it was. It looks like we have one on the front as well. I guess it's just sticking. So we'll grab that out of there. And this one I'll put back on the shaft same way it was as well. So we're going to clean the bearings out. They were a little bit dry, but nothing crazy, so I don't have to worry about it too much, but I always like to clean it out. Now the rear bearing is kind of a battle because there's always going to be some grease left on there unless you take it all off before you slip the shaft back through. But I'm just going to put the screwdriver in here completely wrapped in the cloth so that there's no chance of scratching the bearing. And we'll just do that to clean it out, and you can see it picked up a little bit of grease that was in there, probably from when I slid the thing out of the shaft, or out of the bearing rather. So we'll just get that pretty clean. Then we'll move on to the front, and we'll do the same thing on the front. Again, being careful of the windings. And this was on the front of the shaft. We'll put that back on later. Okay, so that was pretty clean as I expected. There wasn't really an issue here, so it was fine. Okay, so now we're going to add some oil. And what we're going to do is we're going to add oil to that little material there you see on the left, right there. We're going to add oil onto there, just a couple of drops. I'm going to use zooming spout oil, which is specifically for electric motors, but you could also use the blue can, 3-in-1, not the red can, just the blue can, which as you can see here is specifically for fans. Alright, so we'll just add a bunch of drops of oil onto there. Let that soak in. That was a little bit too much. Let gravity fix that problem. Okay. And now we'll go to the front and we'll do the same thing. It's a little bit more difficult to access the front, but it's doable nonetheless. This is why I like the Zoom Spat oil, because the container is super practical. Okay. Whoops. Liquid spill. Okay, so that's the bearings lubricated. Now as that seeps in, we'll go ahead and clean the shaft, which is not that dirty. You know, back here in an ideal world, you would clean all this off, slide it back through, and then re-grease it. I don't have any of that grease on hand, so I'm not going to do that. We run the risk of getting some grease into the bearing, which is not ideal, but you know what is. So I'm just going to try to take the most of the excess off, and then we'll kind of rearrange the grease inside to re-lubricate it. A little bit of dust on there, get that off. And now we're ready to reassemble the motor. So what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of oil on the shaft itself, not a lot, because the oil will work in over time from those that felt stuff in there. I forget what it's called, there's a name for it, but slip this through. Okay, now we'll take everything back up again. And a gear came out. So let's put that gear back in. This gear is going to, pretty sure it sits like this. Okay. And then we'll put a drop of oil. Are you peeping this? Yeah. We'll put the oil on the shaft here, just like maybe one drop. And then we'll slip this back in. And we want to make sure that we try as best as we can to not get the grease from the shaft all over the bearing. So put it in as precisely as possible. You will get some in there, it's completely unavoidable. Just try as best you can, and that's it. Okay, so that's reassembled. We're out of the danger zone of where a lot of things can go wrong now. So let's screw the motor back together first. We're not looking for super tight here, we're looking more for symmetry. These should all be of comparable tightness. Put them all in first just to make sure everything is lined up. And then I'll torque them down afterwards. I'm just going to go to the power of this screwdriver. That's one of the reasons why I like to use this screwdriver, is because it has a pretty reasonable amount of power for putting things together like this. I could make it much tighter by hand, but there's just no reason to. Okay, so we'll slip this back on. Normally you'd have to screw that back in, but yeah, it's broken. So what I had said before about the grease, what I'm going to do here is I'll just put like a drop of oil in there, and I'll kind of work this around a little bit. There we go, a little bit of oil, and I'll take a screwdriver and kind of push it back, because this is always not doing anything, so I'll try to push this back down onto where the shaft is. Now the shaft may be pretty stiff at this point. If it is, that's pretty normal, not at all a concern. We'll get that fixed momentarily. So as you can see, there's really plenty of grease in here. It's just no longer in the right place. I'll try to kind of push this all back onto where the plastic is. You know, and you could replace all this grease, but I think it's probably okay. You see, the way it runs naturally, it all kind of piles back up on the top. It's unavoidable. It's just the way the screw works. Alright, so that's good enough. That's going to have to suffice. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple drops of oil just for good measure down the shaft here. Not a lot, just one or two. Okay, and I'll move the shaft around back and forth, up and down, just to let that kind of work itself in. And then we'll do the same thing on the front. I even like to turn it on in this stage and just let it run for a couple seconds to kind of work the oil in. Make sure the shaft is going in and out. Okay, so now it's oiled. We're going to, I'm still going to address the issue if the shaft is stiff. We'll get there in a moment. We're going to put this back together now. This just slips right in there. Make sure that does not go down until this is in place. Something's not sitting right here. What on earth? Oh, there it goes. Okay, so that's in place now. We can take this off. I want to get those screws on there as soon as possible, because those two little balls are just antsy to fling across the room and become impossible to find again. No reason to go tight here at all, just snug. Not even going to go to the tightness of a screwdriver. Okay. So that's good. That's back on. Got grease all over the place here. We'll put this back on. Just a word of caution, capacitors can hold some voltage. So if you happen to touch those two terminals across there like that, you could get a nice little wake-up call. Won't kill you, but it's unpleasant. And it goes back in there. Excess can get pushed back down. And that's pretty much that. That's working properly. So now let's go back to the front. We're going to slip this thing back on. And if the shaft is stiff, which it's a little bit on this one, what we're going to do is we're going to take a screwdriver and we're going to just gently strike it every which way. Kind of just strike it a few times and move it around back and forth, up and down pretty aggressively. And it should start to free up. This one is staying fairly stiff. It may need some time to run to work the lubrication in. It was pretty dry, but that's what you would do to align it. Okay, now we'll put the little thingy back on there. And to get an idea of if everything is okay or not, I'm going to put the blade on real quick and let's see how it moves with the blade on. That's pretty free. I think that's fine. It looked a lot stiffer without the blade on, but I think it's fine. So that's that. The motor's ready to go. Let's go ahead and move over to the cleaning area and we'll clean everything up. Okay, so I was able to get this to clean up a little bit, and then it started smearing and I couldn't get that off. So I'm not sure if it's better or worse than it was before. I guess it depends on the angle you look at it. Some angles it's okay. Some angles, depending on how the light hits, you can really see all the junk on there. I tried as far as gook on and it was not coming off, and that's as strong as I would really feel comfortable putting on there. So I guess that's just how it's going to be. The blade did not clean up very well. It's got the haze on there, which I expected. I've cleaned enough of these to know when they're going to clean up and when they're not, and this one definitely had something sprayed on it at some point, because you can see here this is the same stuff that's on the switch, and it must have been sprayed when the blade was like this, because it's not on this blade and it's not on this blade, so It must have been sprayed such that the blade was positioned like this, and the stuff fell on the back side of the blade, or on top of the hub here, but not on the other side. So unfortunately this blade is kind of screwed up. I could probably get it off, but it may kind of scratch up the plastic and then have to polish it out. So that's just not a thing for today. It's really too bad that it's like this, because I think this may be kind of a unique fan, or it could just be getting dirty. But it kind of seems to me like the guard has almost like a copper colored tone to it. It's not like pure chrome like they usually are. It seems to me like it's got a little bit of color to it, which is unusual. But anyways, that's where we're at here. It's not going to be a good cosmetic piece, but it's going to be a good mechanical runner. So let's put this back and line up the screw here. Now sometimes that's just kind of what you have to say to these things, you know, when they're really nasty like that, or to get something that's hard to get off. To me, it's only worth so much time to clean it up. You know, I have other instances of these fans that are very nice cosmetically. So if this is just one of the ones that I run around the house and it doesn't look as nice, well, you know, oh well, it's still a nice, good, usable fan that works great and lasts longer than any of the ones you buy today. Couple of the spokes on the guard are all jacked up here. Let's see if we can correct that a little bit. This one is really messed up in all sorts of directions. Alright, that looks pretty good. This is all screwed up too in certain places. Jeez, this is really mangled right here. What in the world? It was almost like it fell or something. And these were pretty tough fans. They could take a lot of different kinds of abuse, and they just kept on running. That's one of the reasons why I like them so much. Very durable. Okay, so put this back on. And I only have one of the clips. I'll put the clip up top. Where's the clip? Here it is. But it's not going to work by itself. We're going to have to put some wire ties on here because it keeps opening up. So I had done this before. I just put this here to keep it shut. Why is this not? There we go. Okay, and we're going to close the other side too. May have to put 2 or 3 pieces on here because it may rattle if it's not secured correctly. Okay. Let's put one over here. And I think we're going to put one more down here at the bottom because it's not staying together down there either. Let's tighten this one up a little bit better. Okay, or it will just break. I probably should be using more heavy duty ones than this. I think this whole grill is a bit oblong, and so it's kind of wanting to come apart. Okay, that should suffice. Alright. Well, it definitely looks better than it did. It's still not perfect, but sometimes you just have to be content with an improvement. And the oscillation is not quite right because of the screw is not the correct size. It's got too much play to it. Okay, nice quiet low. Super quiet. Very gentle, very calm. Still pushing plenty of air though. Oh, the kilowatts. Well, I'll put the kilowatts on. I don't think it'll make any difference, but we'll check it. The voltage is like a volt lower now, so I think it was 0.23 before. It's still 0.23. Okay, very nice. Good, nice, quiet, slow, low. Almost inaudible, really. Super, super quiet. Okay, the medium. Nice and strong airflow. and high. Which is 0.34. I don't know if that's lower because we're down a volt or because it actually is drawing less power. I suspect it's more to do with the volts than the power or the airflow or the cleanliness rather. Well, who knows? Much quieter, and it is definitely throwing out more air. It's running very nicely now. And listen to the difference in the sound between now and what it was before. I'll put that clip in from before now. Huge difference in the sound. Working much better now. It don't look too bad either. It's not perfect, but it's not bad at all. It's going to need new thrust washers soon. You can hear that kind of metallic rattle sound to it. Oh, you hear it better if it's off maybe. That sound. That's a shaft hitting in the back. That washer probably is on its way out. That may eventually cause some noise during operation too. But that's an easy fix, no big deal there. And the oscillation just needs a new screw. That's also an easy fix, just gotta find one. It's not that odd of a size. I should be able to find one probably at the hardware store. Not the one that sells the donuts, the actual hardware store like the Home Depot or something. Or Highs. This is really strong. It's amazing how strong these used to be, especially compared to the junk made today. And you get this nice quiet, slow low. It's fantastic. Such iconic fans with absolutely legendary performance. Fantastic. There you go, the Ambassador 12-inch Oscillations fan. Clean, serviced, and ready to go.